God bless you guys. Today we're going to be hearing the news. Excuse my bloody lip, if you will, and also excuse my shirt behind me. Never mind that, but let's get to it.
Joins us again. We've now moved to a discussion of the latest with the war between Russia and Ukraine. Al, what is the latest with the military campaigns in this war?
Well, Alexandra, it's really shifted, and this is something that's been happening over the last couple, 3 months, is the war has changed. Russia's narrative has always been that we will inevitably win, that we are always on the offense, that we're always taking territory. And for a long time they were, at horrendous cost, but they were taking marginal gains in territory. Things have shifted, and they shifted dramatically. The drone, and we've been watching this for a while, the drone production cycle, the ability of Ukraine to produce drones, whether they're first-person view drones are used on the battlefield, whether they're longer-range drones, intermediate range, that can go like 25 to 200 kilometers beyond the battlefield. And then, of course, these long-range drones going out 1,300-plus kilometers, hitting places like Moscow, St. Petersburg, and well beyond Moscow and St. Petersburg. This has changed the whole war. And so all of this is happening. It's kind of culminating this spring and summer. You saw these dramatic strikes that they had with the Ukrainian drones in Moscow, basically setting a refinery on fire. The reports from Moscow is not only was Moscow covered with dark smoke, but it was raining oil. And I can tell you, as a Desert Storm veteran, that's a little disconcerting when it rains oil. But it is a phenomenon that can happen. So it gives you an idea of just of how the Ukrainians, President Zelensky has said, we're in so many words that we're taking the war home to the Russians, or taking the war home to Moscow. And that's exactly what's happening. And that's problematic for Putin, because he has been trying to shield the Russian people, particularly in these huge urban populated areas around Moscow and St. Petersburg, which are the two big metropoles for Russia, that to make them think the war is something far off, something that doesn't really affect them. And now here it is very much affecting them, because drones are falling down around them. Now, Russia has continued to attack Ukraine with these huge waves of drones and missiles on a regular basis. The latest one this week was, if you look at the Orthodox Church, the main cathedral, the one that's so iconic, that's seen in all the pictures of Kyiv, the Russians actually did hit that, set it on fire. I have to give it to the Kyiv Fire Department. They got out there and put that fire out fast. But this is hitting something that is a cultural site under international law, under the Geneva Convention. It's a violation of countries to target things like churches or like schools or something like that, unless, of course, it's being used for military purposes, and that's a different thing. But this wasn't being used for military purposes. This was strictly a iconic, symbolic, religious site that they targeted. And so the difference now is when Russia does things like this, Ukraine can respond and is responding in such a way to bring that back to Moscow, to bring that back to St. Petersburg. And that's the big shift in the war. And by the way, because of those intermediate level strikes on Russian logistics, command and control centers, everything, the frontline troops can't get the logistical support they need to sustain the fight, let alone to sustain any offensive action. Anytime they get up and try to attack, particularly if it's mechanized, these first-person view drones just rain down on them. And there's about a 15-kilometer no-go zone, as they call it, or drone zone, which reminds me of some have called it like no man's land, kind of referring to the area around the front of World War I, where drones simply dominate to the point that the Russians can't move. The other thing that the Ukrainians are doing, it's not just the air; they're also using these robotic drones on the ground to go up and do attacks. They've actually attacked positions and taken those positions. They've had Russians surrendering to drones, to robots. Big change, big shift.
That's crazy. And Ukraine, keep in mind, Ukraine is way, way smaller than Russia.
And how this week was the G7 summit in France. President Donald Trump was in attendance, as well as Ukrainian President Zelensky. This video you're seeing on your screen of earlier this week. Al, I'm going to bring you back in here. What is the United States' position on the conflict as we heard at the G7?
Well, going back to when Putin met Trump in Alaska, our position seemed to be Ukraine should give up a lot of territory, basically give up the entirety of the Donbass to Russia and sue for peace. And that was that Russian narrative that they're unstoppable, they're going to eventually prevail. Well, that's all shifted, as I just explained before.
No.
And going into this G7 summit, Trump meeting with Zelensky was not on the schedule. In fact, that was very noticeable that Zelensky was there and that Trump was not going to meet him. What happened was he got added to the schedule, and that was President Macron of France that made that happen. Now, the G7 leaders kind of all met, talked to President Trump and said, look, you really need to kind of reevaluate where you are because Russia's not winning. In fact, Russia's losing. Things are very bad for Russia. Economically, things are cataclysmic for Russia. Russia right now, for the first time, is importing gasoline. This is a country that all they do is really they pump oil. Their refinery capacity is so decimated by the Ukrainian attacks that they're having to import gasoline in order to meet their needs. There's long lines for gas stations around Moscow and St. Petersburg. There's huge amounts of inflation. They've just got tremendous problems. The economy is contracting more and more. It's going to kind of hit critical mass at some point. I don't know if it'll be this fall or next year, but they're having tremendous problems with that. And they've made this very clear that the U.S. position, which has been under the Trump administration very conciliatory, accommodating towards Russia, needs to shift, and that Ukraine will prevail. And there were some changes. President Trump announced that he was going to reimpose the sanctions on Russian oil. As of this moment, I don't know if he just said that or we've structurally actually done that. That was not clear to me, but he did indicate he was doing that. And then an agreement or a discussion or an agreement was announced that we were going to do a joint production of a variety of things on the weapons side with Ukraine, which I thought was very constructive. The other thing that's kind of interesting in the background is we've been going to Ukraine to ask them about drone and counter-drone technology. Talk about a shift in roles over the last 4 years. We're now going to them to see if we can get some of their expertise, some of their actual weapon systems, counter-drone, particularly these low-cost drone interceptors, and working with them on that. So that's a big shift. And after what we just saw in the Persian Gulf, President Trump very much realizes our vulnerability to drones and the fact that we've got to do a lot better than shooting a $35,000 drone out of
Security analyst, we appreciate you coming on.
Well, easy to understand. God bless you guys. Stay in tune. More videos will come out.